be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Issei, Rias Find Harry Potter. Special note, this fanfic is written in the masterpiece of Gabriel Herrol on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The next few weeks at Kuo Academy were very interesting and not boring in the slightest. It seems as if something, or rather someone, was conspiring to put improbable events and more or less facetious situations into place. At first it was nothing much. A few traps here and here that managed to caught red-handed the perverted trio before they could take a peek into the girls' changing rooms of the multiple clubs. Like that one time when they somehow managed to tangle their feet into 3 strategically well-placed lassos that had been ignored until they were caught and ended up upside down, freshly ripe for a piñata-style beating. Or once when Matsuda had the brilliant idea of bringing his digital camera to take shots of the girls when they were changing and managed to do so without getting caught. When he went home to download the pictures on his laptop, he had a bad surprise when all he found were pictures of boys in different states of undress. It was as if he and his friends had peeped in the male changing room instead. The horror. But the targets of the mysterious events were not always Issei and his 2 like-minded friends. Some pranks were also set on random students. One day after the morning recess, every first-year students present in school that day found the coloration of their uniforms switched around. The day after, they were back to normal as if nothing ever happened. The one thing everyone, including the staff, were happy about though was the sudden change of heart of the school's cook. She was an irascible little lady in her 50s who could scare even the more recalcitrant student into obedience with only a pointed look, and she was stubbornly refusing to cook anything that wasn't traditional Japanese cuisine. That woman had even managed to make the perverted trio stop talking about the female anatomy during meals time. Unreal. One day, the students came into the cafeteria only to be presented with a literal continental buffet. There were meals from all over the world. From a good United States-style Texas steak inside a hamburger, passing through something called a poutine that was a meal coming from the province of Quebec in Canada, then finishing by specialty meals from many other countries, like Italian pastas and Greek yogurts. Needless to say, nobody was complaining since the variety was also covering desserts. Many girls were glad to be able to taste a rich Belgian chocolate cake, namely a sweet-toothed Kaneko Tauju. The next big event that really registered on the supernatural radar of the local devils was a fantastically well-planned prank on the entire student council. It was the night of a big match of basketball between the local school team and another team from a well-rated school in the neighborhood district. It wasn't a big match because it was a selection for the finals or something like that. Oh no. It was a fundraising match for a local orphanage who had fallen on hard times recently. It was a win-win situation for everyone. Kuo Town's team and the other city's team would get their positive reviews in the press, and the orphanage would get the funds it desperately needed. Everyone was surprised when the announcer started to speak in English before the start of the match after 3 loud rings of a boxing bell. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble. 2 persons in particular sitting in the stands had the greatest shock of their young lives to date. Rias and Aquino had decided to attend the match at the last minute for a little guilty pleasure of an unusual outing and an escape from the paperwork Rias had to fill, since she was being partly responsible for this town. Once the announcement was made, a song called The Jock Jam came out from the speakers, and with the song, coming at human running speed from the changing room of the local team was the whole student council, including their friend Sona, dressed as professional cheerleaders with uniforms with the colors of Kuo Academy's basketball team. They then started to do an elaborate acrobatic performance at the same rhythm of the song. It was like they had practiced the performance for the game beforehand, since it was actually an excellent show. And there wasn't one toe out of line or a single error. Since during the show Genturu Saji's inner pervert was seemingly deep asleep since his hands never wandered even once from the waists of his female teammates when he was required to hoist them or throw them or even catch them. The president and vice president of the Occult Research Club didn't know if they should laugh at Sona and her peerage situation, try to find the culprit of the prank since the Citri heiress would normally never be caught wearing something like that, or congratulate the student council for such a fantastic performance once it would be over. Once the song was over, the spell was seemingly lifted, because every girls blushed brightly at the applause and also at their attires, and Saji's inner pervert had awoken in a hurry, since he was really trying to keep his eyes for himself but failing. Before everything could fall apart, Sona improvised and ordered between her teeth, "Let's bow to the crowd and then get out of here, quickly, when I get my hands on the neck of the one responsible for this farce." The student council obeyed their president in silence, and after a quick bow, they retreated quickly. A few girls were quietly snickering between themselves at the flush on their king's face. Back in the stands, Rias asked her best friend, "Did you felt something odd to Akino?" The priestess of thunder frowned a bit and said a few moments later, "Yes, Buchu. Kaichu and her servants were under some sort of compulsion if my guess is right. But mind magic is not something many devils dabble in except to erase and modify short-term memories. In fact, I don't know of any devil clans who use that type of magic other than the basics. Also, the magic felt somewhat different. I don't think it was devil magic at all, Rias. The effects are too versatile, and there were no magic circles anywhere. It's not from fallen angels either. They don't usually play this nice. And if it was truly angelic or holy magic, I can hazard a guess that we would have felt it clearly. I think we may have a little stray magician playing around." Rias had come to similar conclusions of her best friend, but it was always nice to have the opinion of someone else. So far the magician had done nothing really harmful, except somehow hanging the perverted trio by their feet once a week, every Tuesday afternoon for a piñata beating when they peeped like clockwork on the female kendo club. Great. Just great. Another mystery. It was just what she needed on top of everything. You could just feel the sarcasm of her thoughts. They also still hadn't found much about the new transfer student Potter-san either, and to be frank, she was kind of disappointed to not have more clues. At first glance he seemed completely human, but his aura was somehow draconic and there was also something more. But she and Akino couldn't really get a good read. Did he possess a dragon-type sacred gear? If yes, which one? Her familiar had found out that he was living all by himself in town in a tasty but modest-sized apartment furnished with European furniture, with a good-sized garage attached to it, in which he kept his prized motorcycle and a car. A navy blue Toyota Echo with 4 doors, likely to go grocery shopping or if he had to go somewhere when it was raining or during winter. He came to school every day on his motorbike with his strange but alluring leather jacket though. From what he told to the people asking him questions, his parents were now living in Kyoto, and he had wanted some peace of mind away from the terror that was his younger twin sisters, and the trio of troublemakers that was composed of his dad and uncles. He was polite, generally sociable, but either not clued on in all the subtleties of Japanese culture, or he simply didn't care much about them. It was easy to deduce since he rarely used the proper suffixes after the names of the students he talked with, and he had a daily fight with the homeroom teacher to put the provided slippers before entering the classroom instead of his sneakers. He was also pretty lax with his uniform, wearing the blazer wide open showing his muscular and quite tasty bad Rias chest and having getting rid of the ribbon for the collar as soon as possible. She had to admit, it was rather funny to hear him grumble expletives in English under his breath while sulking after once again losing against the teacher's will. The funniest thing about him was to see how terrified of the fangirls he seemingly was. She never saw a male teenager try to keep himself to run so hard in the opposite direction after being directly propositioned for sex by Aika Kiryu. Oh, he liked what he saw when he had gotten a substantial peek into the perverted female's cleavage. No doubt about that, but he still declined her offer. What was the most surprising in her mind, though, was the way he looked at Akino and her, and also at Sona. He didn't act like a complete fool like most of the school population in face of Kyo Academy's 2 great ladies, or almost wetting himself with fear when faced with the stern and disciplinarian president of the student council. Potter also seemed to really take great pleasure in addressing Sona informally, since it was clearly getting on her nerves, judging by the twitch of one of her eyebrow when he was calling her by her first name. He was polite and jovial when addressed, but it was a somewhat strange and very refreshing thing to see someone not going out of his way to suck up to them or treating them like fragile porcelain dolls. Hell, he even ignored the other students' remarks and reactions to his actions. Peer pressure was not an effective tool on him, it seemed. Yesterday, which was Wednesday, just after algebra class, he directly asked Akino how long it took her to keep her long hair properly groomed, since it was always so shiny and seemingly soft. When her queen answered with a flirtatious tone of voice and a pretty smile. "It's a woman's secret, Harry-kun. You will have to work your way up to a date if you wish to know more." Potter-san answered with a crooked and roguish smile that she must admit was rather attractive, and fired back. "I'm really curious, so why the hell not? I'll take you dancing this coming Saturday evening then. Where do I pick you up, Akino? Is 6 o'clock early enough for you, or do you need more time to get ready?" Rias had to admit to herself that his answer to her best friend's teasing had really surprised her. Nobody had had the balls to take her friend on her word before, and it was amusing to see her caught so flat-footed, since it didn't happen often. The bell for next class had rung before she could answer immediately though. But Potter-san had been quite serious, it seemed, since after classes were over for the day, he had reiterated his offer to take Akino dancing Saturday night. So her queen would have her first official date with the new student, since she had blushed prettily and accepted the offer once she had confirmed his sincerity and then the dress code. Rias had to admit to herself that she was a tiny bit jealous of her best friend, but she would not stand in her way of a good evening. Potter Harry did not seem to be the kind of young man who would try something incorrect so soon in a fledgling relationship. If that first date was really the beginning of a relationship between them, tough. From all she knew, he could have offered the date as a way to reverse the roles in Akino's usual teasing games. And besides, her queen was far from defenseless in the case of unwanted wandering hands. In the meantime, Rias did promise herself to pay better attention to the inexplicable events that were plaguing the academy. If only for her peace of mind, she wanted to catch the culprit, who was probably a stray magician or maybe an unaffiliated one without the backing of one of the usual organizations. She did not like not knowing what was going on in her territory. It could lead to dangerous situations, and she didn't want to put her cute little servants, her family, in any more danger than necessary. Letting her thoughts on the matter settle, she prompted Akino to pay attention to the rest of the game and did the same. The rest of the school week did pass without much fuss, and sadly, there were no more supernatural pranks for Rias to try to find the source of. Of course, the student body couldn't pass the chance to gossip about one of QO's great ladies accepting to go on a date with the foreigner transfer student, and also about the cheerleader performance of the honored student council at the fundraising basketball match the other day. Usually Sona would have used her magical device to erase and replace the memories on humans not in the know of the supernatural to erase every existing proof of it, but someone had been faster than her and had published the video on YouTube before she could act. Now she was forced to deal with her new and unwanted fame. Thank the Maoist Japanese term for Satans that the video didn't make its way to the underworld, or else she would never hear the end of it from her parents and elder sister. Seraphal Leviathan was also the star of a very popular show for children in the underworld, and if she learned that her stick-in-the-mud and no-fun younger sister had also made her debut into the cinematic world, well, she would not have any peace of mind for a long while. On Harry's side of things, the young man was having so much fun. His mother would probably scratch that. She would scold him for using his magic that way, but come on. You can't grow up with the Marauders as role models and not being swept in somewhat into their pranking ways. He was of the same opinion of his mother though, only Uncle Mooney seemed to have totally grown up into a responsible adult. Uncle Padfoot was using his adulthood to live the life of a bachelor as its finest, going out to party and bringing home one-night stands. But he was considerate towards his flatmate. He always put heavy-duty silencing charms around his room and a sock on the doorknob to warn Remus that he had company. Oh, Harry did the same thing once in a while, going out for a pint or two with the lads and bringing back a girl for the night. But at 18 years old and also a bachelor, it was somehow expected of him. Good thing Uncle Padfoot and Uncle Mooney were sharing and renting a house the other side of the street, or his mom would have had serious lower head on a platter for corrupting the girls. His dad, well, it was a mixed bag with him. Some days he would be truly mature and acting like an adult. Some other days he would be as childish as his daughters. Sometime Harry wondered if he was born more mature than his father, and how his mother managed to fall in love with the goof. Back on his pranks though, he would have to be more careful. After spelling the entire student council to act like professional cheerleaders, he had aroused even more the animosity of the devils governing the town. Of course, he had finally managed to identify who was a devil and who was not. But he wasn't certain of who exactly was in charge, and until he was, he felt pretty reluctant to out himself. Was it Rias or Sauna? He knew the basics of how the Devil Society was working thanks to Grandpa Zelrech. But the dead apostle ancestor wasn't a literal fountain of knowledge for this subject as he seemed to be for others. Not many of his alternates from the kaleidoscope had taken the time to investigate properly the underworld, since there weren't many people amusing to troll there. It was much more fun, in his opinion, to go drinking with Azazel, the Governor-General of the Grigori, the Fallen Angels faction. He was still trying to find a way into heavens to go annoy Michael, and last time he was over, Zelrech said that he had a good lead. So while he knew a bit about the remaining pillars of the underworld and about the Yondai Mao's 4 great satans who were the leaders, Harry wasn't 100% sure that Sauna was her real surname. The Gremory clan was well known and research was easy on that subject. But Harry didn't find a Shatori clan anywhere in his books. From his observations, the student council were all part of Sauna's peerage, and the occult research club was the facade for Rias's peerage. From those tidbits of information, he could then deduce that Sauna and Rias were pureblood devils, thus high-class ones from birth, thus giving them access to a set of evil pieces each. It was a real wonder what logical deduction could uncover with the right information to fill the blanks. To be frank, he didn't really care if the girls were regular high-class devils, Pillar Clan's heiresses, or just commoners. It wasn't in his nature to kiss ass. It was partly to break the illusion that they were fine china porcelain dolls that he had asked Aquino for a date. And of course, the fact that she was drop-dead gorgeous also helped. It wasn't like he was planning something dastardly, but knowing how the rumor mill was working, he would most likely be demonized for his boldness. But he was just following the Potter family's motto, Fortuna audaces iuvat. Fortune helps the bold. As if he would sleep with the girl on the first date. If he was only looking for a one-night stand, he would have taken the offer of that strange girl, Eika Kiryu, when she made it. Deciding to stop his brooding thoughts since it was Friday night, and he could do something way more fun with his free time since he had done his homework immediately after getting home once school was over. He got up from his couch and adjusted his jeans before looking outside by the bay window. It was a really nice night outside. He could really go for a good nice flight. His partner was starting to feel cramped, and so did he for that matter. They hadn't gone flying together since they left Kyoto and decided to come live in Kyoto. Casting a powerful notice me not charm on him, Harry then twisted on his heel once the charm took hold, and with a small pop of displaced air, he was gone from his living room and had reappeared on his roof. After a few inhales and exhales, he said to himself, "Divine dividing, online." Once the phrase left his lips, on his back appeared in a small explosion of white light, the White Dragon Emperor's light wings. A deep and gruff voice then said in his mind, "It was about time you called me, partner. I was about to die of boredom." Harry answered back in his mind after rolling his eyes. "Albion, you're such a drama queen. You were the one who asked me to not use you like your other hosts before me did. You asked that I develop my own skills so to not constantly rely on your powers in case you couldn't come to my aid. And you know I can't exactly unleash the wings when I'm at school." The dragon grumbled at that. His partner was right on all accounts. Before Harry, almost all his previous hosts were using only his powers to the detriment of themselves. Yes, he was a sacred gear now, but he was a prideful dragon before. He would not serve a weak master. His current host had taken his instructions at heart, and when he was not training in using divine dividing, he was developing his own set of skills, tweaking the gifts his Fennex blood gave him and supplementing them with his wizarding magic. They were far from being able to fight on equal grounds against ultimate class opponents and higher. But the lad had many skills under his belt that could be a game changer. After all, a winner in a fight is not always determined by who the strongest is. Oh well, better not dwell on it too much. His partner's amused voice snapped him out from his brooding thoughts. Let's go, Albion. No more time for your brooding tonight. Time to fly. Vanishing dragon balance breaker. Then Harry propelled himself high into the air the second he finished the initial call for the scale mail. Of course the boy would want to go to balance breaker that soon. His partner and he had started their official bonding by sharing their love of flying, and later, when Harry had acquired enough experience and much to his mother's disarray, they had deepened their bond by sharing the same love of flying at very high speeds. The faster they got, the more thrilling it was for the dragon and the half-devil. Adrenaline junkies, the both of them. Thus, to answer the command given, Albion answered out loud and triggered the transformation. Divine dividing scale mail. Then together they said, Balance breaker divine dividing scale mail. What happened next was something that would have made many people gasp if they could have seen it. But since Harry had given the command while they were high in the air and protected by the notice me not charm, no one saw what was now happening. White dragon armor with blue jewels that covered his body and strengthened his powers and abilities formed all over him, one plate at the time appearing in a shock of white light. Once the eyes in the darkened helm started glowing an eerie yellow, Harry let out a laughing whooping shout, Albion let out a satisfied roar inside the Potter heir's mind, and both decided to accelerate at around Mach 2. Faster than that, and they would leave Japan in the dust, and they weren't in the mood to deal with foreign fighter jets gunning after them for violating their airspace. No, divine dividing scale mail didn't come with an AI like Jarvis in the Iron Man suit. If he ever met the Lord of the Bible one day and not gotten smote for being an abomination or something similar to that, he would ask the big guy for an upgrade like that. Seriously, it would rock. There was a big noise when they broke the sound wall, but those who heard it all just assumed that it was a jet plane passing by. Thus they vanished from Kuo with nobody none the wiser. Albion and Harry slowed down once they reached the Kyoto prefecture and stopped completely, staying still in the air above the Potter family house. Knowing that his sisters were great fans of Marvel Comics and Iron Man in particular, Harry had taken to train himself those last few months in his free time to make landings similar to how Tony Stark would do in his Iron Man suit while he was in Balance Breaker to amuse them when he would be ready to show it to them. Albion, and he felt they were ready for their big entrance, and he had gotten the help of his mother recently for some modifications in the house to not break anything when he would do his show to wow his little sisters. Azalea and Leilani were now 10 years old. They had long black hair falling past their shoulders with some auburn highlights, and both had the aristocratic traits of their father. They were really identical twins, but the better way to distinguish who was Azalea and who was Leilani were their eyes. Somehow they were both born with one brown eye and one emerald green eye. Leilani was the oldest of 2 minutes, and it was her left eye which was green. Azalea's right eye was green, but they had both inherited some metamorph magus traits from the black side of the family, but not the entire talent like their cousin Nymphadora Tonks, so they could easily switch their eye and hair coloring at will, but nothing else right now. Azalea was somewhat more studious than her sister, but not by much. To date, they didn't need glasses yet, but it could change. They also seemed to be more geared toward aerokinesis since they didn't have much luck with their Phoenix fire, but they were learning and mastering wind-based spells like nothing else. Both sisters were sitting on the couch that was doubling as Daddy's bed when he was a moron, watching cartoons and not up to no good for once when the enchantments of the ceiling and floor activated. An opening big enough to let pass a big humanoid adult appeared on the ceiling, and the floor was spelled unbreakable, especially for those original landings. The girls only had time to blink when they saw their brother in his dragon armor. It was easier to call it that than its full name, land fast and hard with his left knee on the ground, the right leg well positioned, ready to push itself straight at a moment notice to help the body stand up. The left arm was on the ground, palm flat to have a better balance, while the right arm was raised, relaxed but ready to be used if necessary. The only thing extra that was not on the original script for the Iron Man landing was the wings, but Harry was still working on his timing to retract them. Both Potter girls went silent for a few seconds before squealing together with great joy and a megawatt smile. That was so cool. Big brother is just like Iron Man now. Harry then got up, chuckling with humor and deactivating his scaled mail just in time to receive both girls into his arms and accept their hug with a serene smile. Even if they were a pain in the ass sometimes, he still loved them with all his heart. Why he wouldn't love them? They were a family after all. Soon after his arrival, his mother was running into the living room and into his open arms once they were freed of his sisters. Lily hadn't really changed since hitting her 25th birthday. She was still the knockout she was back then. Even with her devil heritage that would be keeping her fit and trim for centuries, she took upon herself to keep in shape on top of that. Harry was man enough to know that his mother was gorgeous. She was still prompt to embarrass him like right now by peppering him with motherly kisses all over his face. He would not change it for anything in the world though. After a good evening with his family, Harry had left again in Balance Breaker, flying back to his new flat. His sisters wanted to know if he could assemble his dragon armor like Tony Stark, but divine dividing didn't work that way. There was a nice surprise though. The scale mail can't be assembled like that for now, but I will work on it. We will be in touch. That was all Albion would say on the subject. Harry then spent the next day, Saturday, getting groceries and also hooking up a local phone line. Many people had iPhones and other intelligent devices, but he wasn't one for that. He had a cell phone, but it was a simple model and he had gotten rid of anything he didn't need on it and took a basic phone package with a flat sum for monthly bill. He had also made a stop at a florist for a few flowers to gift Akino with. He found it somewhat ironic that a reincarnated devil was calling a previously abandoned Shinto shrine home, but then remembered that it was the Christian mythology that was at odds with devils, not the Shinto pantheon. He had told his date beforehand to dress in semi-formal fashion. They weren't going anywhere really fancy, but it would give them both a reason to use their nicer clothes. So, after shaving and taking a good shower, he put some aftershave and antiperspirant, then went to get dressed with a nice pair of black dress pants with a belt and a nice white shirt. He left his collar open and didn't put a tie or a bow tie. He couldn't bear them. The last time his mother tried to put one around his neck, he used his control over fire to burn it to cinders. Needless to say, Harry didn't need to wear one any longer since his mother knew when to pick her fights. Once he was dressed, he took his wallet, put it in one pocket of his pants, and then put his watch around his right wrist. It was 5:15 p.m., so he had 3/4 of an hour to go get his date. Leaving the flat after locking behind him and activating the ward's Uncle Padfoot helped him set beforehand. He was now ready to go. He got into his car, belt up. Then he started it. Once he was sure the flowers for Akino were still on the shotgun seat, he shifted the gears into reverse, and once out of the garage and the entry lane, Harry shifted back to the right gear, and then drove up in direction of Akino's shrine. The young woman in question was somewhat nervous. Never her teasing had been sent back to her like that before, and then the new guy had the literal balls to take her to her words. Now, she was waiting for him to come pick her up for their date. She had pondered for a few hours what to put on. At first she thought she could dress into her little black dress or a sexy cocktail one, but she didn't want to show so much skin on her first date. Akino wasn't body shy, oh far from it, but she wanted to have a nice time, and if Harry-kun was too busy ogling her than twirling her around the dance floor, well, the date would not be pleasant. So she went for a navy blue dress with straps and an opening along her right leg to show a bit of thigh and a light jacket of a lighter blue. She had combed her long hair into a French fish braid ended by her orange ribbon, of course. Akino had also applied a little makeup, only a bit since she didn't want to hide her natural beauty, but rather enhance it a bit. After a last twirl in her mirror left her satisfied, she went outside to wait for her date. And she wasn't disappointed, since 3 minutes later, the handsome young man had arrived. And by the Maoist, did he clean up nicely? Both were taken by the other's physical appearance for a while, but they did snap out of it. Harry gave her a nice smile and offered her a few flowers, a few sweet peas, red camellias, and of course a few Queen's white daisies to finish the bunch. The Priestess of Thunder was bright red. Nobody had given her flowers before. With a stuttering excuse, she went back inside to put them into a water-filled vase. Once done, she gave him a shy "Thank you." He then answered without losing his serene smile. "You're welcome. You are looking gorgeous tonight. Are you ready to go? I have my car parked downstairs." She took the arm he offered her and followed him while asking with a teasing voice. "So you have a car? Why do you always use your motorbike then?" Harry answered easily, not affected by her teasing. "Well, if you must know, I'm somewhat of a speed junkie and I like the feeling of the wind on my skin. It run in the family, you could say. My paternal grandfather was a car junkie, my father is one too, but he also liked bikes and he passed it to me. Of course, it drives my mother completely bonkers since she's the epitome of safe driving, but she learned to live with it. She is rather glad that so far my sisters don't take after us though." They kept chatting like this until they were arrived to the car. Akino was a bit nonplussed, having expected a muscle or a sport car since Harry had just told her he was a speed junkie. Chuckling at her puzzled expression, he told her while opening her door. "I like going fast on my bike, not so much in a car. So I went for functionality here. I first brought an American model out of storage, but the family discovered that we have to drive on the left side of the road here in Japan after we moved in last year. So I had to get a car that has the steering wheel on the good side. We used to live in mostly European countries where the driving is done on the right side of the road until we decided to move here." The young woman made a noise signifying she understood and then belt up after her door was closed. A quarter of an hour and a few topics of conversation later, they were parking into the parking lot of a brightly illuminated nightclub. Once Harry turned off the car, she got out before he could open the door, and he looked at her with a false glare, which she answered with a faux innocent look. He shook his head in mirth, and with a press of a button with the tiny machine on the keychain, and a bip-bip sound was heard once they were both outside, telling them that the alarm system is on and the doors are locked. With a giddy smile, Akino took again her date's offered arm, and he guided them toward the entrance of the nightclub. With a show of ID, the bouncer let them in quickly. Akino could swear on her life that if the man had been a devil and not 100% human, he could have been Cyborg Bale's long-lost twin, seeing how burly and muscular he was. Harry then guided them to a table in the back of the club after leaving their jackets at the cloakroom and taken their token to retrieve them later on. The club was only just opening, for it wasn't full and nobody was dancing yet. Harry decided to break the ice a bit more between them and asked, "Say, Akino, what prompted you to accept my invitation like that? Not that I'm not glad to take you out on this date, but I was half expecting being rebuffed for being too forward towards you. I had a hard time to adapt to the language here, so I'm still not all clued on all the little subtleties of this society. I know the basic laws and things like that, but the proper suffixes and who to call by the family name or the surname are all beyond me still." He said it with such a frank face that she knew he was telling her the truth. Deciding to not play coy for once and be honest, she answered him. "You are the first young man to approach me with that much honesty. You look at me with interest, and while you are quite aware that I am a woman, do not deny it. I saw you look at me with lust enough time already. It's all right, don't beat yourself over the head because of that. I'm really flattered. You clearly appreciate, but you do not phantasm in public like most boys at school. You do not treat me like a porcelain doll either. It's very refreshing. That's why I accepted your invitation. You are also quite easy on the eyes from a woman's perspective, but for more, we'll have to see." The devil wizard hybrid accepted it as it was. It wasn't a fairy tale after all. You didn't fall in love at the first date. Then, when a good song started to play, he shot to his feet and with a cheeky meritorish grin on his face, he took Akino's hand in his, helped her rise from her chair, and then dragged her toward the dance floor where he started to twirl her around at the rhythm of the music, making her laugh joyously. Her date for the evening was a great dancer. She was having fun. After a few songs, she requested a break. While Harry went to order them a drink each, she went to the ladies' room to refresh herself a bit. Once in front of a sink, she opened up the cold water tap and splashed water on her face. She then told to herself in a low voice, "Damn, but he's putting efforts on this date. Calm yourself a bit, Akino. Don't jump him." But by the original Lucifer, he's making himself irresistible, even if it's not on purpose. Stupid teenager hormones. She then splashed her face some more, then took a few deep breaths to calm herself before restarting to talk to herself. "I am not an easy girl. I will not have sex with a man on my first date. Yes, he's hot. Yes, he's clearly interested. But no, I will not let my hormones rule me. Once she was feeling herself back in control, she dried her hands on paper towels and then went back to find her new friend at their table. Once she was there, she saw that he had gotten them a soft drink, probably Pepsi or Coca-Cola. When she raised an eyebrow at her drink in a silent question, he answered sheepishly, "I'm the designated driver, so I'm not taking any alcohol tonight, and I didn't want it to look like I'm trying to get you drunk to get into your panties. It would be really poor form, and sincerely, I'm not sure if I want to find out if the ever-pleasant and polite Yuyudo can do the protective big brother act if I take you home drunk." When she asked pointedly with a bit of frost in her voice, "What makes you think that Kiba would take the big brother role in my life? Yes, he is part of the same club as I am, but he's my kuhai. I'm more likely to play big sister on him than the reverse." When she saw that Harry didn't recognize the term, she explained, "He's my underclassman. He is in his second year, and we are in our third." Harry made a noise that was sounding a bit like "ah," then shrugged his shoulders before answering, "Forgive me if I offended you. It was not my intention at all. It's just, he is the only male in your club, so I thought he would have taken the role of older brother for you three. You, Rias, and what's her name again? Ah, yes, I remember now. Kaneko." Seeing Harry backpedal, fearing having offended her by accidentally sounding sexist made her lose her false indignation, letting place to an amused chuckle. "Ha, so he was already partially trained. That was something good to know." Seeing him pouting because he got caught made her laugh a bit more. By the Maoist, he was funny. After a few more dances and a few more drinks, always non-alcoholics, they decided to call it a night at around 1 in the morning. The drive back to her shrine was done talking about anything that came into their minds. She nearly wet herself by laughing so hard when he described some pranks his father and uncles did when they were at their boarding school. Her favorite was the one where they were hiding in the rafters of the Great Hall and launching balloons full of washable paint, then calling a food fight and somehow shifting the blame successfully to another party of students who were made to clean the mess. Priceless. Once they were at the base of the stairs leading to her shrine, Harry helped her by opening her door like a gentleman and also escorted her up the stairs all the way to her front door. She was about to say good night when he asked her, "So, will you answer my question of the other day? I took you out on a date. I would like to know how you managed to take care of your hair. Seriously, they are like super long. Even my mother who got long hair doesn't have them at the same length yours are." Suddenly taken by an indecisive feeling and feeling a bit of hurt creeping in her heart, she asked, crestfallen, "So, you only took me out on a date for an answer?" Harry reeled back like she had slapped him and answered quickly, "Of course not. Seriously, Akino, you are smart enough to know when a man is only interested in your body, and while I freely admit that you are fucking gorgeous, I took you out on a date because I wanted to know you better outside of your school-enforced persona. I admit also that I'm truly curious about your hair, but even with or without the answer, it won't stop me to ask you out for a second date whenever you are free." That declaration was apparently the right thing to say, because Akino gave him an absolutely dazzling smile, run back to him, and kissed him on the cheek before saying, "Thank you, Harry-kun, I really had fun tonight. Of course we will have a second date. As for my hair, well, let's keep the mystery alive a bit longer, Yufufufu." Then she gave him a wink before retreating inside her home. He stayed there for a minute, staring at the closed door, before turning around to go back to his car, all the while saying to himself, "Women. You can't live with them, you can't live without them." Once back in his car and belt up, he drove back home. It was a good night. To think that a simple openness had gotten him a second date so soon. Oh well, he wouldn't miss the opportunity given to him. The next few weeks were somewhat chaotic for the Occult Research Club. First, a fallen angel in disguise called Rainier asked Hayadu Issei on a date, and then killed him for being a potential threat. Ria's familiar had given the boy one of her flyers, and his dying wish was sufficient to summon her to his side during his last breaths. Her suspicion of him possessing a powerful sacred gear was proven right, since she had to use all of her 8 pawns to reincarnate him as a devil under her command. After tweaking his nose in a somewhat devilish manner by sleeping in the same bed as him, but without a stitch of clothing and not letting him touch her, she explained to him the basics. It was somewhat simple to motivate him though. She only had to tell him that if he works hard enough and becomes a high-class devil, and he could have servants of his own, and the young man took it on his dream to be a harem king. Issei had taken the offered bait hook, line and sinker so fast it wasn't even funny. Of course, Kaneko was not amused by his perverted nature, contrary to Akino, who thought the boy amusing and also somewhat endearing, and poor Kiba, who was only trying to be friendly, but Issei was prompt to hold ridiculous grudges for no valuable reason outside of his own logic. Was it Yuyudo's fault that his kind personality and also his pretty boy looks made him somewhat popular with the ladies? He wasn't taking advantage of the girls chasing after him. In fact, if Rias didn't know better, she would have sworn that her cute little knight was more enamored with his swords than anything else. He just hadn't found the right girl so far. Then, after such a ruckus caused by a stray exorcist named Fried Selzen and her pawn befriending an excommunicated nun in possession of a rare healing class sacred gear of all things and dealing with the rogue fallen angels, she managed to obtain said Asia Argento as her new bishop. They had also found out that Issei's sacred gear was not a twice critical as they first thought, but the boosted gear, or also known as the Red Dragon Emperor's Gauntlet. Talk about an unexpected surprise that her perverted underclassman would be the host of a Longinus. Now, after a few days of blessed tranquility only disturbed by her pawn's perverted antics around the campus, the whole peerage was waiting for one Harry Potter after he made a request to meet with them. While waiting for him to arrive, Rias let her thoughts drift toward the developing relationship between him and her best friend. Akino and he had gone on a few more dates together since the successful first one, and there was a good chance that things could get serious. They were very compatible, it seemed. From what her queen told her, the second date was a good movie at the local cinema. It was an American movie called Hancock, but she couldn't remember much of the details since she wasn't exactly a fan of that type of movie. Something about an unpopular superhero finally being confronted about the damages he caused to his city. The third date was a ride on the back of his motorcycle during a nice sunny afternoon on the outskirts of town and a picnic outdoors. The fourth date was supposed to be something else, but it ended up as a heavy and passionate make-out session on his couch. From what her friend told her in one of their gossip sessions, Harry had a really hard time to keep his hands to himself during their making out, but managed to not let them wander too far. At least, not any farther than Akino wanted his hands to wander. Her best friend could be such a tease sometimes. From what she knew, Harry was still trying to find something interesting for them to do for a future fifth date. Then a powerful, distinct but still unknown presence was clearly felt coming nearer and nearer, snapping out of her thoughts. Kaneko stopped eating her sweets and focused her enhanced senses on the source of the presence. Kiba was now on guard, ready to create a sword with his sword birth at a moment notice. Akino's demure air was gone, replaced by a sharp and attentive look in her purple eyes, and she was standing near Ria's right shoulder, ready to cast her favorite lightning spell at the first sign of danger. Even Issei was feeling something disquieting, and while he had many flaws, he had also a powerful protective streak towards Asia, which explained why he ushered her behind him when he saw her becomes nervous, ready to call his boosted gear if needed. Then 3 successive knocks were heard upon the door, and Rias, after putting her best poker face, answered, "Please, come in." Then everyone could finally associate the strange presence to a face. Potter was the source? It was now clear that he was more than a simple human, but why did they only felt him now? The young man in question looked for all purpose pretty relaxed, but a sharper observer could see the subtle tension in his limbs and a hard-to-read poker face. Once he was sat on the chair in front of the desk, he looked around the clubroom, frankly curious about the decor. Then, after a subtle clearing of the throat, the foreigner gave back his attention to Reyes, who was waiting patiently for him to speak his piece. By the silence weighing heavily all around, he guessed accurately that he now had the floor. After a few calming breaths, he spoke up. "Well, there's no time like the present, I guess. For those who don't know, my name is Harry James Potter, and I am a half-blood. Half-human, half-devil more precisely. I was born in Britain, if you can detect a bit of what remain of the accent, so my first language is English. I thought it was time to end the little charade I created and finally came clean as to why I didn't came forward as soon as I identified the devils in charge of the town. Let's say that certain private circumstances are the cause of my relative ignorance of the ways of the underworld and devils in general. My mother is a pure-blood devil, but she was born and raised in the human world. She never set a single foot in the underworld and eventually married my father, a human. They met in the same boarding school they were attending and eventually fell in love, graduated, married, and then conceived me about a year later. Don't ask me to go in details. I didn't want to know back then, and I still don't want to know today. He finished with a visible shiver. Everyone in the clubroom shared that shiver, even the ever-shy Asia. No, they really didn't want to know the details on how they were conceived. The sex talk was embarrassing enough as it is, no need to add more oil on that fire. Harry took a breath and then soldiered through. I didn't realize that this town was devil territory until we were 3 weeks into the school term. But by then I was asking myself, who is in charge around here? Are they friendly? I had not enough information to risk myself by stepping out of my blessed anonymity. I could have stumbled upon a clan who don't like new people for all I knew. So I kept my presence and powers concealed to the maximum until I knew for sure who was who. It was the safest decision to take with the amount of information I had at the time. When our family's contact finally came around with the research material we asked for, I easily found out about the Gremory clan, and I could also sense quite easily that your power was different than the others, Rias. So I deducted that you were a king, and that the rest of the club were members of your peerage. Harry halted his explanations to adjust nervously a bit his uniform, once again cursing under his breath how uncomfortable it was to be stuck wearing that thing before he retook the parole after clearing his throat once the snickering that his comments caused was over. Back to the topic at hand, and then it was soon after that I found out that Sauna was also a devil. This is one of the reasons why I kept irritating her so often. I really liked to see her lose that stern face of her. Seriously, she's a stick in the mud. She's what, 17 years old, 18 years old? She should live a little and not be so stiff. Well, that, and she is also very amusing to tease. She had suppressed her power and aura so thoroughly that I could only feel it when I was antagonizing her to the point she couldn't hold back her irritation anymore. In the words of my godfather, she's in serious need of a good shagging. After that it was child play to deduce that the student council was her front for her own peerage. But I never once found a mention of a Shitori clan in any of my books, so the last few weeks were passed trying to find out who was in charge. Was it you, Rias, or was it Sauna? Then my relationship with Aquino started to become rather serious, and before we decided to see if there was really something serious between us and not just some flirting and kissing for no specific reasons other than both of us are horny teenagers, I decided it was time to come clean, so to speak. He stopped a bit and gave his attention on the black-haired young woman, and with his crooked smile he told her, "We don't start a healthy relationship on a lie, or without telling the whole truth after all. Don't you think so, Aquino?" Harry was a bit amused to see her lose her countenance, that one Salma facade she presented to the school. He really liked the real Aquino, not the fake one that was her mask. She couldn't really keep her eyes on him, and knowing that he had flustered up a bit by seeing the red appearing on her cheeks was enough for now. He wasn't going to admit being the culprit of the supernatural pranks around the campus right away though. Why would he out himself when the Occult Research Club could use logical reasoning to deduce his more than likely involvement in them? Should he just get it out and told them that he was a wizard? Reyes or one of the others would likely guess he had access to human magic since the pranks he pulled were quasi-impossible to do by mundane ways. Magicians and magi were not so rare in the eastern countries, contrary to wizards who seemed to have mostly followed the Western civilization for some reason. But for now he concluded his explanation monologue by saying, "As to why I chose Kuo Academy? Yes, I could guess that would be a question you would ask me, Reyes. You will have to work on your poker face in the near future, but it's another subject for another day. The curriculum taught by the Academy's teachers is excellent. The school has an excellent reputation internationally, and it's far enough for me to get away from the Cyclones that are my younger twin sisters. And also the inveterate pranksters that are my father and his two best friends whom are like uncles to us. I'm 18 years old. It's time for me to take my first few steps into the real world as an adult. So that's about it, I guess. Questions anyone?" Everyone around had to take a few minutes to digest Harry's story. While it was rare for a pure-blood devil to be born and raised away from the underworld, it had happened in the not-so-distant past, so the origins of his mother were quite believable. While Rias wished she could have more clues about the devil side of Harry's inheritance, she knew that he wouldn't volunteer the information just by his small amused smile she could see on his handsome face. By observing him and talking about him with Aquino during their gossiping sessions, they had found out rather early that he liked to divulge just enough to let them work their ways to an answer, but you would never know in advance if he would confirm it or not. Ria's ruminations were interrupted by the emotionless voice of Kaneko, who said between bites on her sweets, "Magician. Potter-san is a magician and quite a powerful one to boot. I can smell the magic oozing out of him." When everyone's eyes turned back to Harry for confirmation, he said with a deadpan look and voice to the white-haired girl, "You just had to burst my bubble, don't you? You couldn't keep it quiet for a while longer and eat your sweets in silence. I was having fun letting them come to their own conclusions. Seriously, Kaneko, you're such a killjoy. You know, with that attitude you would make an excellent prison guard. I heard that they were looking for some good guards at the prefecture's penitentiary. When you have graduated from high school, you could go apply for a job there." The soft-spoken first year's only answer was a careless shrug from her delicate-looking shoulders and a dull glare from her golden eyes that meant, "Deal with it and shut up." Sighing in resignation, Harry then specified to his curious audience, "I'm not a magician, I'm a wizard. I don't use magic circles to cast, but a different focus since a traditional wooden wand is not exactly subtle. Here's a little demonstration, free of charge." With a lazy wave of his left hand, there was suddenly a squawk of indignation coming from a previously bored to tears Issei, who couldn't care less about an origin story coming from a guy without mention of hot naked women in it. The only reason he had not zoned out of the conversation entirely were because of the few mentions of sex in the story, and a noise of confusion coming from Asia, who was listening attentively since it was the polite thing to do. With a simple switching spell, Harry had switched Asia and Issei's uniforms. Kiba, once the shock was over, had to restrain himself to not laugh out loud, so he contented himself with some subtle snickering. That was rather funny. Issei looked beyond ridiculous into the female uniform, though Asia looked surprisingly good in the male one. Kaneko hardly reacted, only blinking a few times and then rubbing her eyes with her delicate-looking hands to make sure she was not hallucinating. Once she made sure she wasn't seeing a figment of her imagination, she allowed a small smile to be seen on her lips. Seeing Issei flounder and make a fool of himself was always amusing. Rias and Aquino couldn't help but giggle at the scene. Asia was trying, but failing to calm the perverted pawn down. "Issei-san, calm yourself. It's just a little harmless joke. Potter-san will likely reverse it very soon." "But Asia, look at me. I'm a boy, not a girl. I can't be seen in that. Oh, how can I become a harem king when my manliness level is diminishing so quickly?" Then he turned back towards Harry, who was openly smirking and chuckling, and went with his most menacing face and tried but failed to intimidate the wizard. "Give me back my clothes right now, you potty bastard, or you'll regret it." Snorting with mirth, Harry shot back. "Potty bastard? Seriously? That's all you could come with? Damn, but your insults suck, man. Really, my little sisters are better at insulting than you are, and they are only 10 years old. And I'll have you know that my parents were happily married when they conceived me, so the bastard insult is invalid. Don't get your knickers in a twist. I'll give the young lady her clothes back. I'm really glad I decided to not switch your underwear then. I now fear for Miss Argento's virtue." Under the chuckles of all the persons present and a blushing like a tomato Asia and also a scowling Issei, Harry made another lazy wave and both junior devils had their own clothes back. Then Rias took the parole. Excuse me, Harry was not a fan of honorific terms in general and had told them to call him by his surname, but after being in Japan for a few years, their customs tend to stick to you. But what are the differences between a magician and a wizard? It's the same thing, no. Both have access to magic and also human blood flowing in their veins. The Potter heir smiled somewhat indulgently. Rias was really interested in the subject, Aquino too, by what he could read on their faces. After conjuring himself a cup of hot tea and then taking a sip, he started to formulate his answer. To answer your question, I will have to go into some technicalities first, so forgive me if it's kind of long-winded. I'll try to keep it short and concise. Now, you have to understand that among the human populace, there are three major branches of spellcasters and many other sub-branches that I won't go into. First, there are the magicians, but before they can cast adequately, they have to learn how to create their family's magic circle or forge their own. Their ways are the closest to the magic most devils use, if I can take a somewhat accurate guess. Second, there are the magi. Their mindsets are the most immoral and scientific-like of all the spellcasters' branches, and their casting methods are also the most diverse. No two families are the same in their crafts, said crafts that they guard jealously. They also have to activate their magical circuits before being able to do anything worthwhile. I have a few magi acquaintances, and activating their circuits for the first time is said to hurt like a beach. Their sense of good and bad is rather skewed. Many won't hesitate to experiment on live specimens to further their research into their chosen fields. Clock Tower, their academy, and also the Mages Association headquarters, their ruling body, embody the very essence of the maxim, "It's a dog-eat-dog world." And then last but not the least, we have the wizards. All of the above have some, what we tend to usually call bouts of accidental magic when they are children. It's generally the same thing for any child of any race who had access to a particular power when they feel an intense emotion. A wizard is a magical and more durable human who learned to use magic with a fabricated focus, generally a wand. We have our own communities, banks, schools, and even our own separate governments in some cases. We are the most autonomous and well-organized of the three, but many of us are steeped deeply into tradition. Thus many are leery of the advances made by the regular humans, especially the United Kingdom enclave. Most of us seem to have followed the Western civilization with the rise of the Roman Empire. You will likely find most of our enclaves in the Western European countries, and I know there are also many enclaves scattered all over the Americas. Many of our spells have their origins into Latin, but it also varies from country to country. There is a specific law, though, an international one that every branch of spellcasters enforces religiously since the 1690. The International Statute of Secrecy. Nobody who doesn't need to know should know about the fact that magic and magical creatures like dragons and unicorns are real. How each branch handle the enforcement of the international law are entirely up to them so long as they follow it. Generally, the wizards modify the recent memories of any non-magical beings that stumble upon the secret. There are a few exceptions, of course, but it would take too long to really explain. I could go all night long about the subject, and I wouldn't have told you everything I could about the Wizarding Society. Having finished his explications, he finished his cup of tea before casually banishing it. He stayed where he was, waiting if somebody was going to link the events together. He was not really surprised when somebody did manage it. It was Kiba who said with a laugh in his voice and an amused smile, "You are the one responsible of all the supernatural pranks on the campus since the start of the term, aren't you?" Harry gave him his best marauder smile that gave Akino and Rias butterflies in their stomachs, but left Kanoko indifferent and Asia wondering what he was planning, and answered him, "Yep, guilty as charged. I even gave the push needed to the school cook to try foreign cuisine. That one seems to be really popular. But seriously, I sincerely thought that after 3 piñata-style beatings once a week, it would have been sufficient to discourage Matsuda, Hyodu-san over here, and Matahama from still peeping on the female kendo club when they are changing." He was answered by a deadpan tone of voice coming from Issei of all people. "If your goal was to make us stop peeping on the girls when they are changing, you are wasting your time. We love the feminine body so much that it's not simply a hobby for us. It's our own very way of life. You see, Potter-san, I'm not ashamed to be a pervert. I'm not ashamed to lust after the succulent feminine flesh. Who are you to criticize how we want to live our lives? We are old and mature enough to choose by ourselves our own paths, Potter-san. If the price for seeing such bountiful flesh in their natural state without anything to cover them is physical pain, then I'm willing to pay it 100 times over. I'll give you some points for the traps, though. They were really original and cleverly disguised. But I won't let you and that get in my way to become a harem king." Little by little, his voice had risen, not to the point of shouting, but enough to make his point known, and that you could see his determination on his face and hear it very clearly in his voice. For Issei, the path of the pervert was not simply a hobby. It was his very way of life. You could say whatever you wanted against his bad habits. You had to admire his constant devotion to his cause though. Even Albion was an adept of giving credit where and when it was due. Harry looked at him with a new eye, and after a minute of silence he answered. I understand. I can't say I approve or even like it, but like I said, I understand. You are absolutely right. It is not my place to judge your way of life. I have to give you some respect for the determination you've shown to attain your goal though. I will no longer directly hinder you or your friends in your activities then. But I'm warning you only this one time. The moment that your simple peeping becomes inappropriate touching and/or underwear stealing, I'm handing you all to the proper authorities. Do you understand me? Harry had started on a conversational tone, but ended up with one filled with as much determination as Issei's when he was defending his way of life. The newer Dragon Emperor was quick to assure the wizard and the rest of the club of his limits though. Hey, relax, man. I'm a pervert and I won't even try to deny it, but I'm not a sexual deviant. I have limits and morals. Keep that speech for Matsuda and Madohama. They are the ones who are constantly pushing the limits of what's allowed. I'm not a nerd, but I don't want to be expelled since if I'm expelled I won't obtain my high school diploma. I have some pride in myself, thank you very much. Harry only answered with a nod of the head, and then got up from his chair. Looking at his wristwatch, he could see that he had been talking for about an hour and a half, making a few rotations of his shoulders and neck to get the kinks out. He then asked curiously, well, that's about it. Is there something else? If not, then I'm going home. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Gabriel Herrol FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.